Welcome back. I'm Travis with Linux Academy. In the previous lesson, we looked at how to go and expose ports, as well as how to go and publish them. Now we're going to go and look at how we can go and execute commands on a container. And there's a couple ways we can go and do this. The first way of doing this is by going and telling the image what command we're going to go and execute. And we do this by defining it in a Docker file. And we'll be talking about this in more detail in a future lesson. The second way is by executing a Docker run. We can then go and define what command we want executed by the container when it starts up. And the third way is by executing a Docker container exec. Now there's a couple of things we need to know about the exec command. The first one is that it will only run while the container's primary process is running. Also, the command will be run in the default directory of the container. However, there is a caveat to that. If the container is built using the working directory directive, it will use the working directory instead. Optionally, we can use the exec command to specify bin bash, which will take us to the prompt of the container. Then we can go and execute the command we want to run from within the container itself. Now, the command that is being executed when the Docker container starts is either going to be one and done, which will make that container a task, or it's going to be a long-running process. And that command will continue to run throughout the life cycle of the container. Let's go and try each of these out. We're going to start off by creating an Nginx container. We're not going to specify the command because we're going to use the one that was defined in the Docker file. Now let's go and list our containers. Just a quick note, between lessons I went and I cleared out all my running containers, mainly because I didn't need them anymore. So if you have more containers than I do, that's the reason why. Now when we go and look at the command, you can see that nginx-g daemon off is being executed. This is the Docker file for the Nginx image. And if you want to follow along, there will be a link in the description. If we go and look at the bottom of the Docker file, we're going to find the Cmd Directive. This is how we go and define what command is going to be executed by the container when it starts up. Now let's go and start a new Nginx container. This time we're going to go and specify a command, which is going to be bin bash. Now for this to work properly, I've removed the D flag and I've replaced it with the int flag instead. This allows us to be taken to the prompt when the container starts up. As you can see, after I started my container, I'm no longer on the Docker host. I'm within the container itself. So any command I execute from now on will be executed within the container. Now that we're on the container, we can go and start up Nginx by executing nginx-g and then in quotes, daemon off semicolon. Now we have the Nginx process running in the foreground. Nothing terribly exciting going on. It's just going to sit there until we start sending traffic to it. Now I've gone and opened up another terminal and I've logged into my Docker server. Because I started this container without publishing any ports, the only way I can go and generate traffic is by curling the private IP. I'm going to start by listing my containers. Let's get the container ID and run docker container inspect to get the private IP. Make sure you select the container ID of the correct Nginx container. You want the one that has bin bash. All right, I'm going to go and grab the private IP here. And now I'm going to go and generate some traffic by executing curl. Now I've come back over to my first terminal window. You can see that we have a GET request that was made by curl. Okay, so I'm going to go and break out of Nginx and exit the container. And when I go and list my containers, you'll see that the container running bin bash is no longer running. And this is because the container was shut down when the bin bash process was stopped. Now we don't need to be on the container itself to go and execute commands. We can go and run the exec command instead. To do this, we'll run docker container exec. We're going to be using the int flag because we need to make sure that we have a TTY and that it's interactive. Then we specify the name of the container or the container ID, followed by the command. What I'll be doing is getting a directory listing of all the files that is located in user share nginx HTML. And like the previous example, I can go and run bin bash. Now, when I go and exit out, it won't stop the container because we still have a process running for Nginx. Let's do something a little bit different. Because this container is built using Debian, I can execute a apt-get update. To quickly recap, we learned about 3 different ways we can execute commands on a container. The first way is by defining a command within a Docker file, which will be executed when the container starts up. We also have the ability to go and overwrite what was in the Docker file by specifying when we execute a Docker container run. And we also learned about the exec command, which allows us to go and execute a command on a running container. Okay, so that's all I have. Go ahead and mark this lesson complete.